All right, thanks for waiting, everyone. Again, morning. My name is Jackie Wong. I'm the product marketing manager for controllers at Yaskawa. Today's webinar, we are going to go over the SigmaLogic software package version 2. So if you remember, earlier this year, around March timeframe, we did a new product launch webinar. And one of the product we introduced is the SigmaLogic 7 Compact. Just to remind everyone, it is basically has the same functionality as the Sigma 5 version of SigmaLogic. The key differences is that it has no option card, so it's a smaller package, hence the SigmaLogic 7 Compact. And it has internal switch that allows the product to be daisy chained. Another new feature is that it supports linear motor. However, because it does not have an option card, the product does have less IOs compared to the original SigmaLogic product. So today, we're going to talk about the software package that helps configure this product, and also we'll go over some of the new AOIs that's available for this product. And here beside me is Imran Mohammed. He is one of our controls engineer, and today he'll be doing a deeper dive on the software package. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the floor to Imran.
Good morning, everyone. So before we get started, I would like to emphasize to those who are not familiar with SigmaLogic product to first go through the e-learning module to get more comfortable with the product. You can access those e-learning module by going to YouTube, Yaskawa America channel on YouTube. Search for the playlist called Training SigmaLogic. If you don't have access to YouTube, you can also go to www.yaskawa.com/SigmaLogic. You'll see a page like this under which go to support tab, select e-learning curriculum, and you will see a bunch of videos where you can get information regarding the product. With that, let's get started. On today's webinar, I'm briefly going to discuss about the new versions and the new functionality and the improvements that we made on the SigmaLogic software package. So when I say SigmaLogic software package, it includes three things. The first is a Logicworks version. The official released version is 2.0.0.324. and a new set of AOI version 2.0.0 for RSLogix software. So these AOIs are designed to work on RSLogix software version 17 and above. These AOIs goes along with the SigmaLogic embedded code version. So please make sure that you update your SigmaLogic controller using this embedded core. The release version is 2.0.0.38. And later on in this video, I will also walk you through about the supported firmware for this product, and also the product web link information where you can download all this software at one place. To start off with, I will walk through the new functionalities in Logicworks version 2.0. Here's a quick highlight of all the new features. The new Logicworks version will now support the whole new family of SigmaLogic 7 products along with linear motor configuration. You can configure brake delay settings directly from the Logicworks. Support for SigmaWin Plus version 7 is now supported. And direct import of drive parameters is also supported. In this case, you don't need SigmaWin Plus file at all. You can directly import drive parameters into your project. Position completion with resolution has been increased to 6 decimal places. External region wattage value is limited to drive output wattage now. And you can also configure S-curve filter time constant through Logicworks for smoother acceleration and deceleration profile. Of course, I will give brief description about each of these topics later on in this video. The first if you have Logicworks version, how to go about updating version 2. First, you have to uninstall any version 1 software off of your computer if you already pre-installed Logicworks before installing version 2. Once you install the software, open the software and navigate to your Logicworks version 1 file and open the project as you normally open it. The first time when you open Logicworks version 1 file, you will get a message saying the software automatically assumed values for a few settings. This is because version 1 doesn't have these settings, the software has to assume default values to those settings. The settings which are affected by this update are break delay settings. So now the default value would be 50 millisecond. Forward and reverse torque limit is set to 800%. Input power supply is set to 3-phase by default. And if you're using linear motor, forward and reverse force limit is set to 50%, and the linear scale pitch parameter is set to 20 microns. I'll go through these topics in detail as we progress through this webinar shortly. And it's always important to remember that once you update version 1 to version 2, you cannot revert back to version 1 again. So please be aware of that. So as Jackie mentioned before, we now support a whole new family of SigmaLogic 7 controller. You can select controller type when you first initiate a project. As you can see, you can also select the motor type from either rotary or linear. So once you select your controller and motor type, you will see a page like this, as I hope you're all familiar with this screen, which shows the connection status as well as the Ethernet IP address. If you look closely, you can see a status menu on the bottom of the screen, which actually shows the product that you selected. And if there is a mismatch between your selected controller type and the actual controller type on that particular IP address, you will, if there is a mismatch between those two, you will see a message like this saying the controller type and motor type is not the same. So in this case, you can either update your project to match whatever controllers on that IP address, or you can go back, select the controller and motor type all over again and try to connect. Logicworks will now support linear motor. For folks who are using linear motor, go to configure, and there are 3 settings that you have to configure before operating your linear motor. The first is unit of length. Of course, SigmaLogic default unit length for SigmaLogic is millimeter. So if your application is programmed in inches or meters, please make sure that you set this unit of length to whatever unit of length that you want to program later on in your master program in RSLogix. So you have to set the unit of length, and the software will automatically set the feed rate constant so that the position command is sent as millimeter to the SigmaLogic unit. So you also have to set linear scale pitch parameter, which is actually a distance of 1 complete cycle of the sine wave generated by the linear scale. This parameter is normally provided by the manufacturer itself, and it does usually be in microns. And you can also see this graph. It's actually a distance between 2 peak of the sine wave generated by the linear scale. And please make sure that you enter this correctly before you operate your linear motor. As I said before, break delay settings can now be configured from the Logicworks. The range is between 0 to 500 milliseconds. Position completion width resolution has now been increased from 2 decimal places to 6 decimal places. And please be aware that this position completion width is in reference to the motor shaft revolution. So in case if you're using any gearbox, you have to know that the position completion width is basically referred to the motor shaft revolution. External region wattage value is now limited to drive output wattage. However, if you are not connected to the controller, the software will still let you enter any value that you enter there. But once you connect to the controller, the software will automatically cap that value based on the drive output wattage. You can configure S-curve filter time constant, which is basically a time constant that you add for the drive to be able to interpolate position across sharp corners to get smoother acceleration and deceleration. Here in this velocity plot, you can see the difference between with and without S-curve filtering. As you can see, the move is more smoother around the corners here. One thing to remember here is when you apply S-curve filter time constant, the move will now take slightly longer to complete. And that is because the drive will automatically interpolate points around the corner. And we advise that users enter this S-curve filter time constant at least half of the total time that it would take for the move to complete. For example, if your move takes about 10 seconds to complete, we advise that this parameter should be at least less than 5 seconds. Otherwise you could imagine that the graph will be more damped out and you will never reach the actual velocity that you wanted to reach. And again, this value is limited between 0.1 to 5 seconds on the software. And yeah, now you have two different ways of importing drive parameters into your Logicworks project. One is through a regular method that you all used to, is using SigmaWin plus file, and the other is import servo pack PN, which is a new functionality that we have added in version 2. So I'll talk about each of these methods on the next slide here. Import SigmaWin plus file is a traditional way of importing servo pack PN into the Logicworks project, where you change all your settings in the SigmaWin plus software, like tuning parameter, notch filter frequency, and so on. You basically save that file as a SigmaWin file, and then you open Logicworks. You import that file from the Logicworks into your Logicworks project. So that's the traditional way, and that is still supported now. The new way is you can directly write those parameters after configuring your drive. You can directly write those parameters into the servo pack. You don't have to create a SigmaWin file, and you directly open the Logicworks file, import those servo pack PN directly or from the servo pack into your project. So you don't have to create SigmaWin file. But for folks who have to commission their drives remotely, I would recommend to still use SigmaWin file so that they can send those files to the remote computer and import those into their Logicworks project. So what product does SigmaWin plus software support? We get this question a lot. SigmaWin plus 5 will support SigmaLogic, Sigma 5 based SigmaLogic controller, but SigmaWin plus 7 will also support the traditional SigmaLogic, and right now SigmaLogic 7 family of products are not supported in SigmaWin plus 7. But we are hoping that this functionality will be available, and SigmaWin plus 7 will support all of our SigmaLogic family of products by the end of August. So have an eye on, look out for the new version of SigmaWin plus 7. But I would like to emphasize that the current version on the website which is version 22, doesn't support SigmaLogic 7 family of products. On the other hand, Logicworks, however, will support both SigmaWin 5 and SigmaWin 7 files, and you can still import these two files into your Logicworks project. Receiving access configuration works just like as it used to work before. There is no change on the functionality, but the thing to remember here is receiving access configuration is not the same as importing servo pack PNs. Receiving configuration will not import any drive parameters into your project. For example, if you change any drive parameters outside the scope of Logicworks, say using SigmaWin, receive configuration will not import those. It will only import configuration stored in the controller archive. Servo pack parameters will be untouched when you do receive configuration. So please be aware of that. Sending access configuration works a little bit different this time. Sending access configuration will also write drive parameters to the servo pack. So again, if you made any changes outside the scope of Logicworks using SigmaWin, please make sure that you import those servo pack PN using the functionality that I discussed before sending access configuration to the controller. And you will also get a message like this describing the consequences of sending access configuration. Please be aware of that. So that's all for Logicworks version 2.0. Now we will move on to SigmaLogic AOI version 2.0 for RSLogix 5000. As I said before, this set of AOIs are programmed to work on RSLogix software version 17 and above. Here's a quick highlight of all the new features that we have added to the SigmaLogic set of AOIs. External encoder position can now be set using motion axis home set position Yaskawa. External encoder position and speed information can also be read using motion config Yaskawa. New AOI called motion report servo error, which gives you a detailed description of an alarm in case if there is any alarm in the SigmaLogic unit. Additional homing types have been added to the existing motion axis home Yaskawa AOI. We have added support for one-shot command to pretty much all of our motion related AOIs. And programmatic reboot is now is possible. So you can actually program your master to reboot the SigmaLogic unit from your master program in RSLogix. Brake bypass functionality is now available so that you can disengage the brakes when the servo is disabled, so that you can move the axis in case if there is any jam or something. We have added other improvements as well to the existing AOIs, which I will go through in detail shortly. So first, external encoder position can now be set using motion axis home set position Yaskawa. This AOI was already there on the version 1. The only change is we have added one new input parameter called use external encoder. So whenever if you want to set external encoder position, all you need to do is set this input parameter to 1 and execute this block as you normally would. It is raising edge sensitive, and make sure that once you execute this block, you have to keep that input bit on for at least 100 milliseconds for the SigmaLogic axis to respond and to set the external encoder position. If you set that use external encoder position back to 0, it will be toggled back to motor encoder. So whenever you execute that block, it will be motor encoder position which will be set, and not the external encoder. So the point to remember here is at any given point of time, you can only set either external encoder or the motor encoder. You cannot set both at the same time. That's why we added this input parameter to be able to toggle back and forth. So motion config Yaskawa now has additional output parameters called external position FB and external speed FB, which basically gives you the external encoder position and speed information back to the master. You can set the resolution based on parameter resolution here. So if you set this to 3, you will see 3 decimal place accuracy for external encoder position and speed. And we have also added two additional status called motion idle and homing idle. Motion idle is, we expect the user to use it as a status bit, which indicates that the axis is ready to be able to sequence the move. Homing idle works just the same as motion idle. It indicates that the axis is ready to start a new homing sequence. We have added one new additional AOI called Motion Report Servo Error AOI. As I said before, this AOI gives you a detailed description of an alarm if there is any alarm in the in the SigmaLogic unit. You can send this description back to any HMI or upper user interface that you might have. And as you can see, there is a new controller input tag called alarm text. So whenever you execute this AOI, this alarm text controller input tag will get populated with the detailed description of that alarm. In fact, this functionality was there in the previous version, but the difference here is this AOI was actually residing inside motion config Yaskawa. So as you might know, motion config Yaskawa executes in a cyclic manner. This block takes about 1 millisecond to complete. So when our users use like 6-7 axis system, it takes about 5-6 millisecond, for this block to execute. So what we decided is we pulled that functionality off of MC config Yaskawa, and we added a separate AOI, so the user can trigger this AOI on demand rather than triggering it continuously like it was before. And this improved our performance significantly based on our testing. And the thing to remember here is rate sensitive and will impact execution time if triggered continuously. So my favorite way to execute this block was to tie this app error directly to the input condition of the AOI, so that I execute this AOI only when there is an app error or an error in the system. So once I execute this, my alarm text gets populated here. So we now added additional homing types. The first one is home to hard stop with C-pulse. This has been added to the existing homing type called type 1, which is home to hard stop only. But now you can configure it such that you can also home to hard stop with C-pulse using this input parameter called use C-pulse. So if you want to home to hard stop with C-pulse, make sure that you enable, you set use C-pulse bit as 1 before executing this MAH Yaskawa AOI block. So here's a sequence which shows the cycle of the home to hard stop with C-pulse. First, it'll make a back off distance in the opposite direction that you enter here. For example, if you enter a homing direction of 1, say positive, the back off distance would be negative, and it will back off, and then it will try to approach towards the hard stop. Once the hard stop has been reached, once the torque limit has been reached, it will start to creep towards the C-pulse in opposite direction. Once the C-pulse has been reached, it will make an offset move in the same direction, and you will get a process complete status once the homing sequence is complete. So that is how this home sequence works. And there is one new homing type called home to C pulse, which is totally new, which was it never existed before. This type is called type 4. Here's a sequence diagram for this homing type. So when you execute MAH AOI with home type set to 4, the axis will start to creep with the creep speed that you enter here towards this index pulse. Once the index pulse has been reached, it will make an offset move in the same direction. And once the homing is done, you will see a process complete status come on. And the thing to note here is the home direction is basically the direction that the creep occurs. If you enter a positive direction here, the creep would be in positive direction. There is a small minor change that we made to home type 2, which is home to limit switch. The difference is the approach phase here now uses the axial decel rate that you enter here. Before that was not the case. The users were not able to control the axial decel during the approach phase, resulting in over torque limit. Now the users can control the axial decel rate during approach phase. So the sequence just worked the same as it was before. There is no change in the way it works. It'll make an approach move towards the over travel switch using the axial decel rate that you enter here, and then it will make a back off move in the opposite direction and to whatever back off distance that you enter, and then it will start to creep towards the over travel switch again with the creep speed, much lower speed. And then once the limit switch has been found, it will make an offset move from there. And once the homing is complete, you will see a process complete bit come on the motion axis home Yaskawa AOI status. Like I mentioned before, programmatic reboot is now possible. We have added one additional controller output tag called a reboot controller. So you can actually program your master to reboot the SigmaLogic unit. The thing to note here is it's raised edge sensitive, and this bit should be kept on. Once triggered, it should be kept on for at least 100 milliseconds for the SigmaLogic axis to respond and start rebooting sequence. So here's a little program that I created, which shows how I tied my reboot controller tag to this coil, so that when I execute this, the SigmaLogic unit will start initiating the reboot sequence. It's very important to know that when you execute this tag, the SigmaLogic unit will briefly lose communication with your master. Because it's going into a reboot sequence, but once the reboot is done, the SigmaLogic unit will automatically start communicating with the master. You don't have to do anything afterwards. And make sure that you bring this bit back to low, because it's raise edge sensitive, and you have to bring it back to low and re-trigger it if you want to reboot again. Brake bypass functionality is now available, which means you can bypass the brake brake signal and energize the brake coil when the servo is not enabled, which means you can actually move the axis when the servo is disabled by triggering brake bypass request. The controller output tag for that is accessref.o.brakebypassRequest, and you can also monitor the status of your brake bypass command using the controller input tag called brakebypassActive. So here's a command that I wrote, which I used brake bypass request, and I tied that to this coil. And this shows that my brake bypass active is enabled. The timing diagram here shows a different situation where describes the behavior of this brake bypass command. This is very important because when your servo is already enabled, the brake bypass request makes no difference because the brakes are already disengaged and you cannot disengage the brakes. But when the servo is disabled, the brake bypass request gets executed and brake bypass active comes on, as you can see. The important thing to note here is as soon as the servo enable signal comes in, your previous brake bypass request will be overridden. As you can see, the brake bypass active goes low back again. And to be able to enable the brakes again, then you have to execute this brake bypass request again when the servo is not enabled. So always remember that servo enable, whenever the servo enable comes in, your previous brake bypass request will be overridden, and you have to re-execute to be able to disengage the brake again when the servo is disabled. So that is what this timing chart shows. And in addition to this, we also added a couple of other improvements to our existing AOIs. One is one-shot command is now available for pretty much for all of our motion-related AOIs. The list is here. And motion axis home, Yaskawa can now accept 0 torque limit. Before, this was not the case because entering 0 torque limit will give you a homing parameter invalid error. Now that is which is not the case. So you can enter torque limit of 0, which means it simply disables the torque limit unless the homing type is home to hard stop, in which case you have to set that home to torque limit for the homing sequence to complete. One new thing is that we added is like we rearranged the input parameters slightly in order to be in conformance with the standards, and also for the homing sequence to be in order. So we have rearranged these input parameters on our MAH Yaskawa AOI. So so users who are using this MAH Yaskawa AOI, please be aware that your input parameters are now mapped properly. After importing the new AOI instruction, please make sure that your input parameters are properly mapped, because we have rearranged the input parameters to this AOI. So what controller firmware are you supposed to use if you want to migrate to SigmaLogic version 2? Regular SigmaLogic will still support firmware version 3.3.0.253. So if you're using Sigma 5 based SigmaLogic, then the firmware that you are supposed to use is this. And if you're using SigmaLogic 7 family of products, that includes SigmaLogic 7 Compact and SigmaLogic 7 Modbus, the firmware that is compatible with this product is 3.3.0.251. So here's a web link to download all of this package at one place. The web link is www.yaskawa.com/SigmaLogic. As you can see, I've highlighted the version 2 software package in red. So this means that all this package, which is Logicworks configuration utility, add-on instructions, SigmaLogic embedded software, and SigmaLogic firmware, should all be version 2. Except firmware, which is version 3.3. This all goes together. You cannot mix and match version 2 with SigmaLogic embedded software version 1. It doesn't work like that. So please make sure that if you update SigmaLogic embedded software to version 2, make sure that you update the rest as well. Version 2 of Logicworks and all other utilities that you need. And please feel free to go and look at the release notes. The release notes will have all the information that I discussed here. It will have all the information about the new features and bug fixes that we did on version 2. So please feel free to go look at that. So how to upgrade to SigmaLogic version 2? First, you have to make sure that your SigmaLogic unit is updated to version firmware version 3.3. So if you have version 3.0 currently installed on your controller, then migrate to 3.3 using the web interface. You can update the firmware. And after that, uninstall any Logicworks version 1 software previously installed on your computer, and before installing Logicworks version 2. The official released version is 2.0.0.234. Once you install the Logicworks, open your Logicworks project file created in version 1, just like you normally open a project file, and update to version 2. Connect to the SigmaLogic unit, go to Configure, Update SigmaLogic software. Navigate to the SigmaLogic embedded code that you have downloaded from the product web link information that I gave before. And once you update, import any servo pack PNs if you made any changes outside the scope of Logicworks using SigmaWin Plus. This is an optional step. So if you never made any changes onto the drive, then you don't have to do this step. Then go to Connection, send access configuration, and reboot your controller. And once you've done that, go to your RSLogix program, import the new set of AOI version 2 into your RSLogix program, and you're all set. So now I would like to open the floor for questions and comments. You can feel free to raise any questions if you have. The first question is, if I'm using MP2600 and if I update to version 2, will I be able to go back to version 1 if I'm using a standard MP2600 controller? Yeah, no, it just acts like SigmaLogic. So there is no difference between MP2600 or SigmaLogic. You cannot go back to version 1 if you update to version 2. Okay, SigmaWin Plus software. SigmaWin Plus 7 will support, Logicworks will support SigmaWin Plus 7 file as well. Changing absolute position, can we change the absolute position while the move block is executing? Yes. You can change the absolute position endpoint while the MAM move block is executing. All you need to do is you have to re-execute that MAM block again. Yes, should all raise edge sensitive command be held high at 100 millisecond? Yes, all raising edge command should be held at 100 millisecond because it is to account for the Ethernet IP communication delay. Yes, all raising edge commands should be held high at for at least 100 millisecond for the SigmaLogic access to respond. Will the new Logicworks run on Windows 10? Yes, new Logicworks will run on Windows 10 as well as Windows 7. Both 32-bit and 64-bit operating systems, are compatible with Logicworks software. Okay, one of the user wants to revisit the compatibility screen here. As I mentioned before, so this page actually has all the utilities that you require for SigmaLogic software package. And I would like to emphasize again that if you use Logicworks configuration utility, say version 2, you have to use add-on instructions, SigmaLogic software, and SigmaLogic firmware. This all has to be same. You cannot use version 2 and SigmaLogic embedded version 1. it doesn't, you cannot mix and match across this table. This has to be one, if you're using version 2, the rest is all should be the version 2 utility. So you have to use SigmaLogic version 3.3 firmware, and make sure that you do that. I was asked question again on the move axis, motion axis move block. If I the absolute position, I think you don't have to re-execute that block. You can, however, change the absolute position on the fly. I'm sorry, you don't have to re-execute that block. It will automatically take effect on the fly. And should I have to update all of the AOIs if my program, if I update my SigmaLogic software? Yes, if you update your SigmaLogic embedded software, you have to update all of your AOIs. Otherwise, some of the AOIs might not work properly. So make sure that when you update your SigmaLogic software, you update your AOIs as well to version 2.0. So that's why I would like to emphasize this slide more. It's always good to know that if you update any of this utility package to version 2, you have to make sure that you use all this along with it. Can I use Sigma 7 motors with regular SigmaLogic? Yes, you can use SigmaLogic 7 motors as well with Sigma 5 based SigmaLogic unit, and you can still use 24-bit resolution as well. And it works on the other way too. If you are using SigmaLogic 7 product, say if you're using SigmaLogic 7 Compact or SigmaLogic 7 Modbus, you can still use Sigma 5 motor and also Sigma 7 motor. So is there any external encoder support for SigmaLogic 7? No, SigmaLogic 7 does not support external encoder. As Jackie mentioned, it doesn't have it's a compact version. It doesn't have a option card like a traditional SigmaLogic controller. So external encoder are only supported on Sigma 5 based SigmaLogic controller, the MP2600 based SigmaLogic controller. I see two more questions. Are there any new help files available for the AOI version 2? Yes, you can download the help file as well in the same website link that I given you before, which is www.yaskawa.com/SigmaLogic. You can find the updated help file for the new version of the AOI in that website. And one more question. Can I use Sigma 7 amplifier with MP2600 base SigmaLogic? No, you cannot use Sigma 7 servo pack with MP2600 base SigmaLogic. Currently, the market plan there is no option for Sigma 7 servo pack with MP2600. So if you want to use external encoder along with extended IOs, then you have to go for MP2600 with Sigma 5 servo packs. Hope that answers your question. So with this, I would like to wrap up this webinar. I would like to thank every one of you for tuning into this webinar. And I hope this webinar was informative for you. If you have any other questions after this webinar, I would like you to send in those questions to training@yaskawa.com. And I would like to wish you all a great rest of the week. See you soon. Thank you.